Throughout time, people across the world told each other tales of how they came to be, of heroes and monsters, romance and tragedy, death and rebirth. Mythology helped shape the ancient world, explaining the unexplainable. This is Mythology Unleashed. Many ancient cultures lived side by side with the wilderness. It provided food for both the hunter and the forager, wood and stone for the builder, and acted as the setting of many myths for more than a few storytellers. But while the forests, fields, and other wild places offered many bounties, so too were they fraught with dangers. To the ancient Greeks, the wilds were the domain of a goddess who lorded over all that lived there, and was worshipped by all who would enter. A goddess who was serene and beautiful, giving and nurturing, yet could easily turn deadly in the blink of an eye. Artemis. Artemis was the daughter of Zeus and the Titaness Leto. Her birth was a strenuous one, as her mother was forced onto a floating island called Delos by Zeus's wrathful wife Hera, and her servant, a dragon called Python. No sooner had Artemis been born, she acted as her mother's midwife, who then gave birth to Artemis's twin brother, Apollo. Both Artemis and Apollo would go on to become two of the most diverse and widely revered of the Olympians. Artemis was never seen without her silver bow and arrows, made for her by the Cyclopses of Mount Etna, and she was often accompanied by a loyal pack of hunting dogs, given to her by the god Pan, as well as a clutch of forest and river nymphs who attended her as she made her way through the forests, sometimes on foot, and other times in a chariot drawn by a pair of stags. Just as her brother Apollo bore many grand titles, so too was she honored with many laurels and said to oversee many diverse aspects of the world. Primarily, she was the goddess of the hunt, the chase, and the wilderness, and all of the creatures and plants that dwelt within it. Any and all who used a bow and arrow, whether they be a hunter, a warrior, or an athlete, held Artemis in incredibly high regards. Being so closely identified with forests and hills, she was greatly associated with transitions, both physical and metaphysical. And as a result, many of her temples were often built on the outskirts of human settlements. She was also the patron of young girls, watching over them from birth until they reached the age of marriage, and was said to protect pregnant women and aid them in childbirth and later child-rearing. Despite being so closely associated with childbirth and child-raising, Artemis herself never had any children, for she refused to ever marry or take a lover, though that would not stop many mortals and immortals from trying to win the favor of the beautiful goddess, all of which would end in utter failure. Artemis featured in a handful of myths where she interacted with mortals, though more often than not, she showed off her more vindictive and vengeful side. In one tale, a Theban queen named Niobe had boasted that she was a better mother than Leto, as she had produced 7 sons and 7 daughters, whereas Leto had only produced 1 of each. In response, Artemis took her bow and arrows and slew each of the queen's daughters, while her brother Apollo slew all of the sons. She was also prone to vengeance against those who had indirectly or unintentionally slighted her. Such was the case for King Onus of Calydon, who forgot to include Artemis in one of his annual harvest sacrifices. In turn, Artemis sent down a monstrous boar, known in legend as the Caledonian boar, which devastated the kingdom and surrounding countryside, destroying fields and killing anyone in its path. The Caledonian boar was the subject of a massive hunt that saw the gathering of many Greek heroes, and saw the titanic pig slain by Onus' son, Meleager, and the huntress, Atalanta, one of Artemis's premier followers. On another occasion, one of her handmaidens, a nymph named Callisto, was seduced by Artemis's father, Zeus. Artemis held her nymphs to the same rule of chastity that she held for herself, and when she discovered Callisto had broken such a rule, and to her own father no less, she changed the beautiful nymph into a bear, to be hunted and killed like an animal. But Zeus intervened, and brought Callisto's form into the heavens, where she is seen today as the constellation Ursa Major. Callisto was saved from Artemis's wrath, but not all who angered the goddess were so lucky. Such was the case for the hunter Actaeon. It is said, Actaeon was out one summer day hunting in an unfamiliar part of the forest, one where no man had set foot before. He became lost, even being separated from his hunting dogs, and soon stumbled upon a lovely spring, where he witnessed Artemis bathing within the crystal-clear waters. No matter how hard he tried, he could not take his eyes from the beautiful goddess. But when Artemis discovered his presence, she turned Actaeon into a handsome stag, so that he could not boast of seeing a goddess naked. Terrified, Actaeon ran through the forest, calling to his hounds, but no human words came out, merely the cries of a deer. The hounds were instantly alerted, and gave chase as their master had trained them to do. The hounds ran the stag down, sank their teeth into his throat, and unknowingly killed their own master. But Actaeon was not the only hunter to ever stand at odds with Artemis. In days long ago there lived a hunter named Orion, a giant whose prowess with catching game outmatched any other on Earth, and even rivaled the skills of Artemis herself. Some say that Orion was the only man that Artemis had ever fallen in love with. Others that he was a devoted follower and trusted confidant. Regardless, it is said that Orion had grown full of himself, overzealous with his hunting abilities, and desired to impress Artemis, and prove himself the greatest hunter, that he sought to kill every animal on Earth. In order to stop Orion from destroying the circle of life, the gods sent a large scorpion to kill the mighty hunter, injecting its lethal venom deep into his bloodstream. In mourning, Artemis and her mother Leto placed Orion among the stars, where he is seen today battling Taurus the bull, the stars that make up his belt being particularly visible on winter nights in the northern hemisphere. To say that Artemis was a force to be reckoned with would be a severe understatement. Her prowess as a huntress and combatant, her power over nature and animals and childbirth, and her effective means of punishing those who cross her were greatly renowned throughout the ancient world. In many ways, Artemis was the embodiment of how the ancient Greeks perceived nature and the wilderness. Beautiful, alluring, powerful, enduring, fickle, vindictive, giving yet unforgiving, peaceful, yet suddenly cruel, capable of giving and sustaining life, but also equally capable in taking life.